We're gonna pick a random product from Amazon and we're gonna model, texture, and render it in Blender. And if I make the product look cool, I'm gonna be able to send that footage to the company and convince them to pay me to make more footage. If you want to learn more about the modeling tools and techniques you're gonna see me use in this video, then check out my new ebook. I'll put the link below. We're going to click on this product image right here. Now it's going to expand and I can go right click, save image as, and I can now save this somewhere to my computer. I'm gonna make a new folder specifically for this little project. I'm going to name that watch. Now there's a couple more pictures over here and I don't know why there's a hanging lady. There's also some pictures from the front which appear to be orthographic projection. We can use this to help us with the proportions of the model. We're going to go to PaintNet and we're going to crop out this little front view picture. I'm going to invert the colors so it's a bit less irritating for the eyes in Blender. And I'm going to save this as a background image. I'm going to do the same thing with the side view image because I don't want to look at whatever this shit is as a modeling. Now in Blender we're going to delete the default stuff. We're going to go to side view, Shift A, image, reference, and we're going to load up the side view picture as well as the front view picture. We're also gonna try to align these so they show approximately the same scale, but for some reason the lower part of the front view image is cut off, so we can't really do that. But whatever, we're just gonna eyeball it, so let's just start with the front face. I'm also gonna go up here to the outliner. I'll set the window to image editor, and that way I can load up another image, and now I have a good reference for the watch as I'm modeling. Now with Shift A, we're going to add a new circle, and I'll set the number of vertices to something like 256. Rotate that sideways so it's facing me, and now scale it up so it's aligned with the reference image. We're going to fill this circle, and then from side view, we're going to extrude it a little bit, scale it up, extrude it again. We're going to bring this part down like this, and I'm going to add a loop cut this way, and I'm going to bevel that loop cut to create this little curved shape on the side. Then in the front, we have to inset this a little bit and extrude it inwards, and now we can extrude out the little screen for the watch. It looks like there's a tiny little gap between the actual screen and this little frame around it. So we're going to take a tiny little face loop like this and extrude that backwards. We're going to extrude this a bit further backwards like this. Place a loop cut right here so that we can select some faces like this. Now we're going to need some subdivision surface in the back here, so we kind of fucked up by making this many edges in this circle in the back. So we're just going to delete all this. This in the front can stay, but as you can see behind the face of the watch there's a different object which is a little bit smoother and rounder, and we can make that separately. So we're going to place a circle here, and that circle is going to have only, let's say, 16 vertices. We're going to scale it up so it matches the size of the face, then extrude it backwards, and we're going to select some geometry in the back and push it a little bit backwards like this. We're going to connect these two vertices in the back here, and then I want a loop cut which I'm going to align with the 3D cursor over here. Now I can fill this face, and from side view I can use that to kind of extrude out this shape over here. This has to be perfectly flat, and we're going to slide this inwards a little bit. Then I'm going to add some new vertices over here so that I can join these two parts here. And once I have a subdivision surface modifier applied to this mesh, I can add a crease to some of these edges over here, and that's going to shape them a little bit better. I'm also going to try adding a loop cut over here to get some more control over this shape so that I can make it appear a little bit more round and curved and nice. We're going to bring this inwards a little bit so that this is not so thick. And currently this looks kind of shitty, but once we subdivide it a bit further, it's going to look better, I promise. Now we have to figure out a way to fill this space back here. First of all, we have to delete the lower half, and we also have to activate the Z-axis on the mirror modifier so all of this shit is reflected to the bottom as well. Now we can apply the mirror modifier, merge any vertices by distance, and then we can select this edge loop back here, face, grid fill. The span is going to be 6. And once we offset this a little bit, we're going to get a perfect filling over here. Now let's apply one level of subdivision, and then hopefully we can get this shit under control a little bit better so it's going to look better once we subdivide it even further. Now that we have all this extra geometry, we don't need to have the creases anymore. I'm just going to align this geometry a little bit better down here. In fact, I'm going to delete everything on the lower side and on the right half, and that way I can make sure everything is completely flat in the back. I can make some adjustments on this side over here to make it look a little bit better. And now I'm tired of modeling this shit, so I'm going to add another mirror modifier on the x-axis and the z-axis, apply that, and with another 1 or 2 levels of subdivision we should be fine. We also have to consider this thing which appears to be the battery on the back side of the watch. So we're going to select a large surface like this, inset, loop tools, circle, scale that down, and we can just delete all the geometry on the inside. If you don't have your loop tools activated, go to edit, preferences, add-ons, and type in loop, and just check this box. Now we're going to extrude this inwards once, then I'll select this entire face loop, but I'll deselect a couple of faces from the side over here. Then I'm going to select only the edges over here. Now I can extrude this outwards, delete the inner faces here, and now we're going to extrude this inwards a little bit further, then extrude again and push it down into the watch. And I'm going to make a tiny bevel over here, shape 1, 2 segments. I'm going to duplicate this and push it to the side somewhere so I have an extra copy in case I fuck something up and I need to go back. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm about to apply some subdivision surface, and this cannot be undone. So I added some creases over here to this part of the watch. We're gonna apply one level of subdivision to see what this looks like now. I'll clear this crease and I'll replace it with a small bevel. And now I can subdivide this again, and now I really like how this looks. Maybe it will be better if we use our G-stretch tool to straighten these lines out a little bit. But you don't have to concern yourself too much with these tiny ass details. No one's gonna see this anyway. We're going to create a cylinder with about 8 vertices. Scale that cylinder down and we're going to place that in between these two little bulges here. This is going to be the part that connects the little wrist strap to the face of the watch. Now we can delete these vertices here, extrude some vertices like this and just try to make them follow the path. We can't really see from here what this is supposed to look like, so we're just going to try to kind of approximate the size of this. I think it comes up to somewhere around here, and then we have this buckle thing happening. Now I realize it's going to be easier if I just delete all this geometry in the front here. Then I can just select all of this, extrude it, right click, and use Alt S to add some thickness to this shape. And I can then use this thickness to model this part over here. Now we can make this buckle part a tiny bit thicker. Then let's add some more loop cuts to the stretch like this. And now we can take some edge loops, which we're going to then use our loop tools on. And with the space loop tool, we can make all these edges equally long. We can also make them relax a little bit to make this whole thing a little bit smoother and rounder. And I'm going to do that a few more times because I want to have enough face loops around here so that I can create these little lines here on the inside of the strap. So again, loop tools, space, loop tools, relax. And now if we add some loop cuts around this shape, we should be able to just select some face segments like this. And then we can just inset that. Make sure to remember the thickness of the insetting. I'm going to set mine to 0.04. Extrude, right click, then use Alt S to push them inwards a little bit. Make sure to also remember the offset here. I'm also going to set mine to 0.04. Now we're going to do the same thing on these other segments here. So again, 0.04, extrude, right click, Alt S, minus 0.04. We're going to scale this down just a little bit like this. And then we're going to extrude the sides and expand them outward. Now we have an extra little gap over here. So that way when we use our subdivision surface modifier, it's going to look a little bit nicer. Now we're going to select all these edges like this. Make sure to also select these edges on the other side. Now you can add some bevels to get this shit under control a little bit to make it round but nicely shaped. Then go to Object, Shade Smooth, and I think this looks pretty cute. So let's place the 3D cursor in the middle of the watch. We're going to duplicate all of this and scale it to -1 on the Z-axis to bring it down to the underside. And now this one's gonna have to be a bit longer. It's gonna have to come all the way up here. So my idea is maybe we can kind of copy a segment from here, place it over here and stitch it down here so it looks seamless. And I think that should be pretty good. So let's give it a shot. First of all, we're gonna delete whatever this is. Then we're going to select everything like this with our brush tool. Now use Shift D, right click, and we're going to rotate it and bring it into place somewhere around here. We're going to move that around until it looks about right. And it looks like we're gonna have to use some proportional editing to move this around a little bit so that they can connect a bit more perfectly. We're going to copy some more segments from down here and place them in between. Now we can select the edge loops around the gaps like this. W, bridge edge loops. And then with double G, we're going to slide one edge over and remove vertices by distance. And we're also going to do the same thing up here. Bridge edge loops and get rid of one of the edge loops. We might have to slide some shit around to make it look a little bit more smooth, but this looks more or less okay. So up here, we're gonna select this open gap, face, grid fill. A span of 3 and the right offset is gonna allow us to fill this correctly. The reason we're using a span of 3 is because we have 3 edges right here. Now we're going to add a cube, and this is going to make the little piece of rubber which connects the two sides of the strap. Is there a name for this fucking thing? Does somebody know? We're gonna slide that around a little bit, delete the faces in the front and the back, place it around here, place it in the middle of the strap, and then scale it up to make sure that it's wide enough. And now we can just bring this a little bit closer with Alt S. Also this side over here, you can bring this edge loop, you can push this. We can add an extra loop cut over here to control the shape a little bit better. Now add a bit of subdivision surface, bevel the edge loops like this, apply the subdivision surface, extrude, right click, Alt S to add some thickness. And since we're modeling high poly, we're going to take all these edges and add another tiny bevel, another level of subdivision surface, and now this is ready to go. Then we're going to duplicate this thing and push it to the side so we can use that as backup later if we fuck something up. Apply one level of subdivision surface to the strap, and now we're going to take this part and lift it up a little bit so that we can select a segment over here, and now we can delete that W bridge edge loops to fill in these holes on the inside. Now we're going to take some faces on the inside here, and we need the same number of faces, so 8 faces on the back side. Inset, loop tools, circle. This one is okay, but this one in the back is a little bit too big. So we're gonna make them approximately the same size. Loop tools, bridge, and now it should be okay. Now in this little gap that we created here, add a new cube and scale it down. we're going to use this cube to create this little metal piece that goes through this hole. So we turn this into a circle with some loop cuts. And we're going to use a face from this circle up here. We're going to extrude that out. From side view, we can do control click, and we're going to push that into the hole down here. Now add a subdivision surface modifier, add a loop cut over here and bevel it, object shade smooth, and now this little thing should be good to go. The only thing we're still missing is this little metal bit that connects these two objects here. So we're going to go to side view, add a new plane, rotate it so it's facing us. Then scale it up a bit on the z-axis and scale it down to make the whole thing smaller. We have to have one edge somewhere up here, and then another edge hugging this part over here. Now we're just going to add a bunch of loop cuts over here so that we can push this inwards like this, and this is going to start giving us the rough shape of this object. We should have probably tried a bit better to make this symmetrical, so we're going to delete one half, duplicate another side, and then mirror it to the other side so that these are going to be identical on both sides. Now we can place that on the side right here, extrude this, and with the 3D cursor placed in the middle of the watch, we're also going to bring this to the middle. Now we can duplicate the whole thing and mirror it to the other side of the watch. Extrude, right click, Alt S. With individual origins, we're going to flatten the surfaces on the sides. And now we can add a subdivision surface modifier. I'm going to select these corner edge loops and we're going to bevel those. I'm also going to bevel these to make them shaped a little bit more nicely. Now go to Object, Shade Smooth. And I don't really know if this back side is very realistic, but it doesn't matter because we're only going to show the front part in the render. I'm just going to select a bunch of surfaces down here to create some more holes, and then that should be the last part of this model. So Inset, Loop Tools, Circle, scale them down a bit on the individual origins. And for each of these holes, we're going to try to find 8 faces in the back which we can connect these holes with. So inset this, loop tool, circle, then inset another area, loop tool, circle, and just keep doing that until we have a circle for every hole on the inside. And now we can just start bridging these with the loop tools again. Now I need to make a normal map for these lines around the face of the watch. I'm not going to show you how I'm going to bake the normal map because I showed you that in the last video. And I also have a bunch of tutorials where I showed you this. I'm just going to show you how I modeled the stuff that I'm later going to bake. So we need a circle with 512 vertices. Extrude that and bring the extruded part inwards a little bit. Then we're going to make a couple of loop cuts around the circle like this. Rotate the inner part, then select another edge loop, rotate a bit. And just keep doing that until we have the rough shape of whatever this is supposed to look like. We're also going to rotate the outer vertices a little bit. We're going to take each of these edge loops and we're going to bevel them to make this whole thing a bit smoother. Now we'll just take one little segment, extrude that downwards. In edge select mode, deselect the long edges like this, and then go to individual origins and scale down the small edges. If you want to be cool, you can make these top edges a little bit thinner. Now place the 3D cursor in the middle of this object, select this little trench that we just created, and then select another 3 segments next to it as well. Control I to invert the selection and delete all the other faces. And now we have 4 segments remaining out of 512, which means this is 1 out of 128 of the full circle. Which means if our 3D cursor is over here, we can press Alt-E, spin, click on Use Duplicates, and set the number of steps to 128. Now we duplicated this thing 128 times and arranged it in a circle. And now I'm going to bake this onto a normal map like this, so now you can go watch that tutorial and come back. Now I baked my normal map onto this plane over here, so we're gonna get rid of this shit now. And let's start adding some materials. So we're gonna need some kind of plain black material for this strap over here. This is supposed to be some rubber or some shit. So just a dark gray with an increased roughness is gonna do it. Then this little piece also has to be black, but this one's gotta be metallic. And we're gonna reduce the roughness to make it a little bit shinier. The material for the strap, we're going to name that to rubber. And we're also going to apply that to this part over here. And this we're going to rename to metal. And we're also going to apply that to this part on the inside here. Now let's also apply the rubber material to this shape. And now we're gonna have to UV unwrap this shit in the front so that we can apply the normal map around the watch. And we're also gonna have to design the face of the watch, and we're gonna put that on the face here. So mark a seam around the face, then mark a seam over here. And we don't have any geometry on the back, so we don't have to mark a seam there. Let's just UV unwrap this and see what we get in our UV map. I think this is probably the most inefficient way to unwrap this. We're gonna get rid of this ring over here because that's just this little part in between. We don't have to have a texture there. This can just be a plain material. So we can just put that somewhere in a corner and get it out of the way. We're gonna put the face inside this thing like this. And we're gonna scale the whole thing up so it covers the whole canvas. And now we can make use of the entire image and all the pixels on the texture. So let's go back to shading, add a new material to this. We're gonna use a black color. Go to Shift A, Image Texture, and load up the normal map which we baked a second ago. We're gonna add a normal map node. We're gonna plug color into color and then plug that shit into normal on the principled node. Now you can see these lines out here, but we have to adjust the UV map a little bit. So let's go back to UV editing. We have to make sure we don't have any lines in the face, so we're gonna scale that down a bit. And the lines here are a little bit too big, it just looks a little bit too chunky, so I'm gonna redo this baking shit off camera. The best way that I can think of to get a texture for the face of this watch is just to make it in fucking Blender. So watch this. This is a 700 IQ trick. I bet none of you thought that you can do this type of shit inside Blender, so pay attention. Add a new little circle on the side here, and that circle can just have like 16 vertices. This is going to be the middle point of the watch. Then we're going to duplicate this little circle and scale it by about half. Bring it way out here somewhere. And now we're going to create these 3 little dots here. So duplicate this again and move it up by about 1.5 meters or something like that. Scale that by 0.8 and then do the same thing one more time. Now place the 3D cursor in the middle, select the little circles on top here, and we need to have 12 of these. So do Alt-E, spin, use duplicates, and number of steps is 12. We're also going to need another dot on the outside up here, aren't we? So just make another circle up there, Alt-E, spin, use duplicates 12. And that should do it. And we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 dots for this red pointer over here. I'm pretty sure this is the second hand. So separate this circle to new object, then add an array modifier to this circle. Uncheck relative offset, but check object offset. And now we're going to add an empty object. We can use the plane axes, for example. And we're going to target that object in the object offset in the array modifier for this little circle. Now this empty object is going to determine the scale and the direction of the instances in the array modifier for this circle. So you can increase that shit to whatever it was, 9, right? And you can also scale this thing down, so now each instance is going to be smaller than the one before. So if we place that somewhere around here, we now have a perfect second hand for this thing. Apply the array modifier, then add a plane, move it up a little bit so the lower edge is in the middle, then push this edge up to somewhere around here. This is going to be the hour hand, and then we're going to make the minute hand. Create some loop cuts on this shape, take the edge in the middle, and with proportional editing, we're going to set the fall off to something like sphere. Now we can scale this up on the x-axis to get the right shape that we want to have here. We're just gonna have to bring all this a little bit closer together. Now delete all the edges on the inside, extrude this up, then extrude again and Alt-S to add some thickness. And just make this a flat surface, which we can now subdivide. Now I think this looks pretty decent for the hour hand. We're just going to duplicate this, make it a little bit longer and also a little bit thinner, and that way we're going to have the minute hand as well. Just make sure that both of these are placed exactly in the middle of the watch, and now we just have to color this thing. So this needs to be a red material. Make sure to set the specular on this to 0. We're going to set the same red color to these shapes here, and the others just have to be white, so create a new material with no specularity. Now we can go to top view, and with Ctrl-Alt-0 we can align the camera with our view. The camera settings set the type to orthographic. Also set the resolution to something like 2048 by 2048. This is gonna give us an aspect ratio of 1:1, and then just zoom this shit out a little bit by changing the orthographic scale. You can add a sunlight. Make sure to render with a transparent background, so go to render properties, go to film, click on transparent right here. Now hit F12 and you're going to get a beautiful little face texture. Then go to image, save as, name that watch face, and then in PaintNet we can load up this watch face. Add a new layer with a black background, and then we're going to add some more text such as WED24. That's going to give us a date. That has to be placed somewhere around here, and we're going to delete these little dots so they're not overlapping. I'm not going to use the company logo because I don't want to get sued, so with Ctrl-Shift-F I can flatten this and save the image. Now in the shading workspace I can add another image texture node, and I can open up the watch face image, plug that into base color, and in UV editing I'm going to make sure that the face sits on top of this shit correctly. Now this has to be some kind of glass material, so set the roughness to something very low. And we can also use this as an emission map, so plug that shit into emission, and if you want to you can increase the emission strength value, and now this is going to glow in the dark a little bit. Now the models and the texture is ready, and now we're gonna try to render this. So I'm gonna go to the world shading settings. With my node wrangler, I'm going to add an environment texture node, and then I'll open up an HDRI. I'll just use something that I already downloaded. If you don't have any HDRIs, Google HDRI Haven or just Google HDRI website and you're gonna find a whole bunch. And I already had some kind of a studio lighting HDRI, but we can do way better than that. So I'm going to add a couple of planes here and there, and we're going to generate a new material for this plane, set the emission color to white, set the emission strength to something like 24, and it will probably look a bit better if we set the color to a slightly bluish color. And now we're going to duplicate this and place it around the scene in a couple of locations. I want to render this so that when I look at the watch from the front, I'm gonna have some reflections of these planes visible in the scene. So I'm gonna place a couple of these lights somewhere right behind the camera, and that way the reflection is going to be visible in the image here. But I'm obviously gonna adjust the shape of this a little bit because I don't want it to be this big. The best thing you can do is make a very small plane like this, add an array modifier, create a bit of space between individual instances, and then add another array modifier on the other axes. And now you have a little grid of lights like this, and this is going to look really cool in the render. If you place these correctly, now it's kind of going to look like you either have a studio light reflecting here or some kind of window or something. You can do whatever you want with this. But I'm going to extrude this face in the front, and I'll scale the extruded part way down, and that way I'll be able to bevel this a little bit. Just make sure that you adjust the UV map and the materials of the remodeled area. Now this face is going to be a little bit rounded, which is going to make the reflections look completely different. Now I'm going to add an empty object in the middle here. I'm going to parent every object from the watch onto that empty, and this way I can easily control the rotation. I'm now going to animate it so it's rotating a little bit. So I'll place one keyframe over here, and then down here I'm going to rotate it like this, and that's where I'll place another keyframe. We're going to set the keyframe interpolation to linear, and that way it's just slowly going to rotate like this. Now we can render this animation and export it as a little video, and now companies can use this as product images or product videos or whatever. If you want to learn more about the modeling tools and techniques that you see me using in my videos, then check out my fucking ebook, subscribe to the channel, let me know in the comments what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next one.